Tomopop. This is Chris Pranger here, Tomopop's intern, one of the many great interns we have, in the many great writers that we have. Today is Friday, and it's time for show and tell, and because I have been busy with work, I would have done this as a, picture-based thing, but I can do the camera, because it's show and tell. Hey, why not? This will work for everybody. Everyone loves media, so bear with me that the camera quality and audio quality and all quality, notice there's no editing because I don't have a computer that can edit. So sorry for that, but I mean, hey, I'm old-fashioned, and that's why I love my old Lone Ranger action figure. This is my one-to-one version of Woody. If I was Andy, this would be my Woody. It's a Lone Ranger action figure. This one is from 1980 by LRTV Inc. Made in Hong Kong. It says right there on his back. Right back. Yeah, you can't see that. But, this is my Lone Ranger action figure. Initially, this was my grandmother's. And I go to her house all the time, and we'd play with all her toys that she had, because she would collect them from me. And eventually, I borrowed this and just never gave it back. And I don't know if it's considered stealing or not. She wasn't playing with it. Yeah, it's mine now. And originally, he came with... he's supposed to come with a set of guns. Obviously, there are no guns. There's no revolvers there. He had a horse. He doesn't have his horse. So I just have him. And he was this toy that I've had for the longest time, who I would play with as a kid. And I would pretend, and the way I played with my action figures when I was a kid, and up till probably about junior year of high school, was everything I had was a show. So this, anytime I played with Lone Ranger, it was a Lone Ranger show. And it was, I had some pretty involved storylines. And I'll get into that in just a sec here. But the cool thing about the Lone Ranger was he is about the size of a G.I. Joe. Here's comparison for size. See, they're just about the exact height, which is perfect. And they have almost the same main joints of articulation. So as a kid, I just assumed this had to be the first evolution of this. And as a result, I was able to then play with Lone Ranger with G.I. Joe. So even though I didn't have any other, G.I. Joe or any other Lone Ranger action figures, I could still play with Lone Ranger. This is not Tonto. This was another G.I. Joe. And he didn't get involved in the storyline for a very long time, because I didn't actually know anything about the Lone Ranger as a kid other than he has a horse, he is a cowboy, and he kicks all of my G.I. Joe's ass. And as strange as that is, but that's what he would do. Every time the Lone Ranger show would be on, my show of playing with him, he would be the main character amongst any G.I. Joe was evil. All of them were evil. All of them were always evil. And like I said, this was the main bad guy. I don't know this G.I. Joe's name because I honestly wasn't huge into him. I had a few, and I have a bunch now. I have a couple dozen. That's just because I found them and collected them. I don't know all their names. I know very few stats. I never watched the show. So, up to you. Who is this? Leave a comment. And, well, you can't have any of my toys, but you get the credit for knowing who this is. I also had a 12-inch figure of this guy, one of the 12-inch full-on dolls. He's not... I have him somewhere, but I'm not getting him now. That's not important. But what happened was, when I would play with these, this was the main villain, and there were just a few other bad guys. This was one of them, although I think this might have come from an off-brand of G.I. Joe. I believe the Core, for those interested. It was like it was the cheaper versions of, of the G.I. Joe. They're still around, pretty certain they're still around if you find the Core. They're always cheaper. They're like the Mega Bloks version of Lego. But yeah, the Core, I know I have some other in here. This one, yeah, here's definitely the Core. It's on him somewhere. But, like, those were some, I had some just basic bad guys. There's only 3 or 4, and they defied the Lone Ranger because they were evil. The G.I. Joes were evil, and I had no reason why. And they could all fly as long as their arms were out, because that was kid logic. So they could all fly. Lone Ranger didn't have to have his arms out to fly. He could just fly because he was the Lone Ranger. And he was the main character, and that's how cool he was. And it wasn't until I got the dopiest G.I. Joe that the Lone Ranger got a good guy sidekick. Lifeline, who is probably considered one of the lamest and least loved G.I. Joes ever, is actually probably my second favorite because of the way I played with him. I got this super boring white character in a box of cornflakes. Because, and as boring as cornflakes are, these are the type of toys that cornflakes would pop out with. It was a G.I. Joe, which is cool to get a G.I. Joe from box of anything, but having to be Lifeline, who is the medical assistant. He's the field medic of the G.I. Joes. He doesn't even use a gun. Like, his action figure came with, I believe, a defibrillator. It was a suitcase that opened up and probably had stuff in it that I think was a defibrillator. So he became the sidekick to the Lone Ranger. Super white cowboy gets super white medical guy, and this was the Tails to the Sonic. That's their dynamic. The Lone Ranger was so much cooler than Lifeline. It was pitiful. And I did have some storylines where the Lone Ranger was sick and Lifeline had to take over, or he got really angsty and so he switched sides for a while, but then he got his ass kicked by Lone Ranger, and so he came back. He's like, I'm so sorry, Lone Ranger. I suck. And he's like, it's okay, because I'm the Lone Ranger, and I still put a boot up your ass, but it's okay, because I'm the main character and I'm a good guy. And it was, that was the dynamic. These two would fight this guy, who I never really gave a name to my knowledge. He didn't really have a name. He was like the commander or something. He would fight with him and this guy and one other person in here in my bag of tricks. This guy. Yeah, these were villains. This was a villain. I would get more G.I. Joes every so often to go along with them. I had this guy who was like a robot because someone had painted him silver. I had just more anything I could get. Anything I could get. This random jackass, whoever he is. Like I said, a lot of these are the core, so you're not going to be able to recognize them as G.I. Joes. Some of them, I don't even know if this is G.I. Joe or core. That guy looks pretty cool. Check that eye patch. But it wasn't until this guy, and I know this guy was a G.I. Joe. He's missing his lower half because it's fallen off. But this guy became the new villain because I'm like, oh crap, he looks like another cowboy. Awesome. I need a good cowboy villain. And so this guy was no longer the main villain. This guy was. He was way more powerful, brought in a whole crap load of people, such as Ninja, who is missing his lower half as well. It's all in here, don't worry, it's not lost. This guy who looked like he could shoot lasers, so he could shoot lasers, even though I know that's night vision, don't matter. He could shoot lasers. They came with a bunch of others I got from some garage sale. Because he became the main villain. And I think I just called him like Chuck Norris or something like that, because he looks like Chuck Norris. Kind of, sans the beard, but it worked for me. So, once again, can you name this G.I. Joe? In the comments. Anyway, this was the first figure I actually repaired. He's since been broken again. But, with any G.I. Joe, if their midsection rubber band snaps, their lower extremities fall off. And so here is his crotch and his legs. And these things will just fall right off because they have no rubber band support. So this was like the most brittle action figure I had initially, because the rubber band was really, really, really brittle, about to break. And so I couldn't play with him as hard, so he was just really powerful and he didn't have to move, which made him even cooler. Until finally the rubber band snapped, and this is the first one I actually repaired myself. I took a little rubber band, like double rubber banded it, like, a couple times over, and repaired him, which was amazing to do. Because then all of a sudden he was really stretchy and really agile, and it was awesome. And so, beat him up, kicked his ass. That doesn't happen very often in toys, where the main character gets beaten. And so the villains were winning pretty severely until this guy showed up, who, again, I don't know the name. This was the very first black G.I. Joe that I had ever seen in any of my... I think it was probably the only black figure I have ever seen, or I have in my action figures. This guy was the first new good guy, other than these two, to show up in the storyline. So I guess that speaks a lot about me as a kid. That was a good thing. First black guy shows up, I instantly associate, he's a good guy. And he was not only such a good guy, he was cooler than these two by far, and much stronger. So Lifeline really hated him because Lifeline sucked, and the Lone Ranger trained him to be the next Lone Ranger. I don't understand it, but that's my thought process as a kid. This guy's cool, so he's going to take over this guy's spot. I suppose you could say this is Buzz Lightyear to Woody, but they were friends, and they're friends. So, like I said, speaks volumes about me as a kid. Why the Native American didn't get involved as anything more than a villain, I don't know. But that's, that was that. And I went on with these for a long time. It became really elaborate. After I started watching Dragon Ball Z, obviously they could do much more elaborate fight moves and stuff. Flying and I don't think I ever had them shooting energy blasts, but they were pretty sweet. But that was the Lone Ranger action figure for me. That's how I used him. Those are the adventures I got in with him, and all of the G.I. Joes that I had / off-brands. I think this is Sonya from Mortal Kombat. I don't even know. She was a villain too. I don't understand my kid mind. It was cooler to me to have more good guys than bad guys, because then the good guys have a real struggle. But back to the Lone Ranger action figure. I mean, if you probably know a little bit about the Lone Ranger himself, and in the 80s, action figures are starting to really take off. So this little dinky guy came out. I'm sure you can find him on eBay or Craigslist or Amazon or something like that for pretty cheap. If you're just looking for one to play, I highly recommend playing with him because he, like I said, matches perfectly with the G.I. Joes. He's a little weird because he can't sit perfectly. I mean, he has to sit like that. He looks cool when he's sitting, when he's dangling his legs because he's a cowboy. He had a good amount of articulation. His arms moved up, his legs moved and all that. His head moved side to side, and even the little scarf, for some reason, you could move that independently of the head, which was kind of cool. Not relevant, ever, but, it was cool that he had all these points of articulation. And, mine is really loose because I've played with him so many times as a kid and still play with him sometimes. But and obviously the paint is well worn down. This is an action figure that has been loved. You can tell this toy has been loved extensively, and that's kind of the storyline. I mean, eventually it petered out. It's implied this guy takes over. I don't think I ever gave him a real... he has a name. It's got to be like Blizzard or something. I gave him some cool name, but he was awesome. My storyline resolved with him eventually taking over. The G.I. Joes start switching sides because the Lone Ranger side is so powerful, and Lifeline got better too. He kind of took over. Lone Ranger became old and kind of settled down. And the original villain still was a villain, but he never quite reclaimed the villain spot. So that's all that for Friday. I think that's more than enough for a Friday. That's a show and tell right there. You have now seen the Lone Ranger action figure. Told you about it. If you want it, go check out everything. I'll post a link maybe if I can find a good auction. Do I want to post it? Well, I'll post something. Some information will be posted and linked through, so you can see more if you really want your own. But yeah, maybe another time you'll get to hear the much more elaborate Ninja Turtle show that I have involved. So that's Chris Pranger signing off.